Hey, welcome back to the third installment of the Go-to-Market Works 25 to Thrive series. And today we're going to focus on demand generation. So as a quick reminder, what is it that the series is looking at? We are breaking down business critical topics associated with your go-to-market. And we're breaking those down into 5 constituent parts that are controllable by you, each covering 5 minutes in time. So it's rapid fire to deliver value within 25 minutes. This is predominantly focused on founders who've hit some level of product market fit and they're looking to now scale their teams and their revenue engine on that path to the 10 to 20 million or so journey, because even once you've hit that initial traction, we all know everything breaks and you need to rethink about the way you're scaling your systems and your processes to actually get from here to where you want to be in the future. This is something I've done a few times over, as well as advising and helping others to get there as a fractional leader and a coach and advisor. So let's dive in to this week's topic on demand generation. So why demand generation? Why have I picked this? Well, it's roughly thought that just 3% of a market is ready to buy at any given time. So what about everyone else? Well, that's where demand generation comes in. It's an essential competency if you want to accelerate growth faster than market growth, which every startup typically does, unless you happen to be in an incredibly rapidly growing and buoyant market, in which case it might be quite hard to outpace it. But no doubt, if you're in that type of market, it's going to be very competitive and you're still going to need to stand out through your demand generation activities. It's worth pointing out here that demand generation is not the same as lead generation, or as other people sometimes call it, demand capture. This is all about growing the top of the funnel, growing the size of the pie, finding eyeballs and interests that are not already putting their hands up ready to buy. This is around creating and generating that demand as well as capturing it. If you can get it right, even if you have an SDR team, it can be a real multiplier to your go-to-market. It essentially will help you generate a lot more pipeline cost efficiently and scalably. And then if you're not a sales-led organization, if you have a product-led growth motion, for example, then demand gen is pretty much one of your only options, unless you have an incredibly self-servicing kind of viral type of product. So demand gen, really critical competency for most organizations. Okay, let's dive into the 5 key concepts we need to understand in order to nail your demand generation campaigns and competencies. So the first is targeting, the second is channel selection, the third is great content, i.e. the message that you're trying to convey, the fourth is creative and how you package that and deliver it, and then finally we've got to talk about conversion experiences. All of these 5 are inputs that you have absolute control over. And that's why we're focusing on these 5 areas of demand generation. So let's dive in and look at targeting. So why is targeting such an important area for demand gen? Well, it has a huge impact on your cost per acquisition and your overall cost of acquiring a new customer, client. Because if you're targeting the wrong types of leads or the wrong types of personas and ICP within your demand gen, even if you pull them into the funnel, what's going to happen is they're going to fall back out of it. And that's going to make your spend very inefficient. So it will look great at the top of the funnel, lots of leads for a relatively low acquisition cost. However, very few of them are going to make it through to the end, and therefore it's going to drag down your overall efficiency. It's also essential to align your teams. So if the marketing team, who are likely driving your demand gen activities, are focused on one particular ICP or persona or targeting criteria that is not 100% aligned with sales, with CS, with the wider business, you are going to be running into a ton of trouble and creating misalignment and aggravation between the teams. And then finally, targeting is really important, and it's come first in this list because who you're targeting is very much then going to dictate, well, what channel should we be utilizing, what content and message is most appropriate, how do we create creative that works for this target audience, and what is the conversion experience, or what should that be? So targeting kind of sets the pace and dictates everything else that comes after it. So how do you improve your targeting? Well, firstly, you need to have done your buyer journey research. You need to understand in particular what their triggers are, what your current customers who found you, what were they suffering from, what were their triggers, how did they think about finding a solution, how did they ultimately land on you, what were some of the key criteria they were looking for. These are some of the basic questions you need to understand. And then even better, if you can find correlations between your target customers' pain and their triggers. For example, their pain might be that they are suffering from an inability to deliver XYZ because they don't have enough resource, and so they're hiring for that resource to cover that gap in their operations. However, your software may be able to do that job cheaper, faster, better than if they're hiring someone. So that can be a great trigger. And perhaps they've had a poor quarterly earnings report, and therefore you can dig into that. You can understand, okay, well, what's driving that? And then your solution might be able to solve for that. You should also understand what segmentation parameters actually matter to you most of all. And I've put here horizontal, vertical, or geographical. So what I mean by that is when you're thinking about targeting, well, are you going to be targeting a job title or a role, which is a kind of horizontal type of targeting? Are your messages and everything else best targeted at a specific vertical or industry or market, which is vertical? Or actually, is it quite regionally and geographically important that perhaps you're a slightly more local business, in which case geographical targeting is going to be super important. So just figure out what the right criteria is for your targeting as well, and that's going to really help improve the efficacy of your demand gen. And then finally, how do you know you're getting it right? Well, tracking success, you want to look at improvements in your click-through rates and your cost per clicks. That it would suggest that you're targeting well if those are starting to come down. Your cost per acquisition and your cost of acquiring a new client, again, should improve. And if you're really nailing your targeting, then all your sales velocity metrics should improve as well. So your pipeline, average deal value, sales cycles going down, close rates going up, etc. So that's how you can track success on targeting. A lot of these metrics hold true for all these other 5 variables as well, but I would suggest you look at these ones in particular when it comes to targeting. So let's dive into channel. So why is channel the next most important thing? Well, firstly, it's really important that you make sure you get your content and your message and your creative where your target audience hangs out, right? You've got to meet your market where they are. So it's really important that you focus on using the right channels. The second thing is that you've got to really understand the unique rules and behaviors of that channel. They are not all the same. TikTok is very different to Reddit, is very different to LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, you see it kind of absorbing some of the cultures of short videos from TikTok, of quotes from Twitter, and so on and so forth. But they're done in a slightly different way. If you're a sarcastic, if your customers are perhaps on Reddit, and your brand can take some of the sarcasm and slightly edgier aspects of it, then maybe it's a great fit. Maybe it's an absolutely terrible fit. That's where the targeting will help you dictate what the right channel is. But you have to understand the unique rules, and does it fit with your, not just your customers, but your brand persona and your tone of voice, etc. as well. And that channel will then hugely inform the content and creative that needs to go into it. And it's not the other way around, i.e. don't think of a cool idea and cool creative and then say, where can we distribute that? Oh, it probably suits XYZ channel. That's very much the wrong way around to think about it. In terms of improving your channel selection, well, and your performance within channels, then the best thing to do is observe and engage first with the channel. So i.e. don't start to advertise on it until you understand it. So be an organic listener, commenter, engage with it, as I said, start to understand it, be part of that. Community, that's for social channels. Obviously, there's many other channels as well, right? So you've got out of home channels, you've got email, you've got SEO, and so on and so forth. So there's many different channels that could form under your demand gen. But they all have their own particular characteristics. So obviously, it's very important to understand them first. If you don't know them, and you need to get to grips very quickly, then ask or find a guide to learn the rules, bring in an expert. Obviously, test and iterate is a key aspect of all of this 25 to thrive on demand gen. You've got to continuously improve and learn. And then ideally, you just want to focus on one channel at least to start with until that becomes a reliable source of qualified pipeline before you then move on. Don't spread yourself too thin. Don't chase the latest trends or see what all your competitors are doing. Do what is right for you until you've become really competent at that particular channel. In terms of tracking success, there's kind of three key things here. So 2 holdovers from the previous one around click-through rate and cost per acquisition should improve if you are hitting the right channels with your target audience on them. So should sales velocity metrics and your CAC. What's different here is that the percentage of ICP leads should, of course, that's kind of inherent within the targeting, because if you're targeting the right people, they're all ICP leads. But if you move to the right channel, then that channel should have a higher percentage of ICP leads coming into your pipeline than perhaps other alternative channels. That's one good way to check that you've got the right channel when you're building out your demand gen campaigns and reviewing them. So let's dive into the third area, which is content. So content is king. It's a cliche, but it remains true. This is the core message that you are trying to relay to your target audience via your selected channels. Get this wrong or convey it in a poorly worded or poorly structured message, it kills everything else you might have done well, right? You might have really tight targeting, brilliant channel selection, incredible creative, brilliant landing page experiences. But if the substance, the core of your demand gen campaign is poor, muddled, unclear, doesn't matter. You can do everything else perfect. It is going to fail and fail hard. So content is king. It is the linchpin of your demand gen campaign. You do need to spend a lot of time making sure you are crafting the right message. So to improve your content performance within your overall demand gen campaigns, firstly, optimize for clarity. Keep things simple and specific in terms of your content and your messaging. Don't get overly clever or cute or complex. Don't include loads of jargon and things that might confuse people. Then make sure you are focusing on WIFT, what's in it for them. It's an essential concept that so many businesses get wrong all of the time. They write what's great about them, about their features, their brand, why they're so clever, why people should pay attention to them. They forget all about their audience, even if they've done the first two things right. You've got to make sure your message is empathetic and aligned to the interests of your target audience. Make it about them. They are your heroes, not you. Now, also write multiple versions, particularly of any headlines. That's really important. I would suggest, if it's going to be a key demand gen campaign, at least 20 or 30 versions of your headline and multiple versions of your body copy. So that you can test them in various different A/B and multivariate tests, but B, actually just the pure act of writing multiple different versions is an amazing discipline to ultimately tighten up your copy, your content, your message, and make it better through the sheer action of just working through multiple versions of it. Then, of course, test and learn. You can never really know 100% before you launch something what's working, to make sure you stay on top of it, adjust and iterate as needed. And then there's a great book which is all around how to make messages how to create resonant messages that stick and people remember, and that is called Made to Stick. So definitely recommend you take a look if you're struggling with creating great content that is memorable and seems to capture people's attention. Then Made to Stick is a great book recommendation for you. In terms of tracking success, well, great content can often create a conversation. So you want to look at things like engagement, emotional reactions to it. If you can, test recall. Like, what do people remember about your message? Is it aligned to what you hope they would do? And then, is there an expectations match, i.e., what they expect your product to do, and also things like the landing page experience, does it match with the content that you're producing, or are you somewhat overselling things? So you've got to make sure there is an expectation match between your message and your content and the actual ability to deliver against that. Now, moving on to creative. This is hopefully a chance, along with the content piece, to be fun and very much exercise your creative juices. Creative that sits and wraps around the content and the message is super important because it helps you earn attention. It helps you grab people's attention. Remember, we started this, that less than 3% of the market at any given time are actually actively buying or looking to buy. You've got to earn that attention of the other 97% of people who might well benefit from your product or service, but they don't know it yet. So creative is a fantastic way to cut through the noise and help earn yourself attention in front of those prospects. It will allow you to stand out in a crowded marketplace. Great creative elevates your content, and I'm going to go on to the next page to say it should never overpower it, but it should elevate your content and your message. And of course, creative, when done well, should reinforce your core brand principles and your product. So creative is an amazing way to tie everything together and be both interesting and consistent, which comes on to the next slide. So to improve your approach to your demand gen creatives, well, firstly, you need to match the channel and differentiate, i.e., you need to know the rules if you want to break them. So understand the rules of the channel and conform to them within, so that it doesn't look like you have no idea what you're doing there, but then know enough about it that you can break some of those rules to stand out. Don't underestimate the power of consistency while seeking novelty. And my favorite example of this is Absolute Vodka. They've been running this campaign for, I think, over 25 years, maybe even 30 years now. Same concept, very, very clear that it's Absolute Vodka in every one of these iterations, but every one of them is unique and clever and special in their own way. So they are building amazing power through brand equity and consistency, whilst also delivering novelty. They're just a wonderful example, and you want to look to do that. What you don't want to do is throw out completely different campaign assets every single time you run something with no common thread to the rest of the brand or anything you've done before, because you are building zero brand equity. You're essentially pressing reset and starting again every time you do that. Equally, if you're incredibly boring and consistent and nothing stands out, then people will get quite bored and they will stop noticing your brand as well. And then finally, as I said, make sure the content is the hero for your brand gen campaigns and isn't overwhelmed by the creative, which can often happen. So you can get some really clever ideas. And actually, while I was trying to find some pictures for this presentation, this video, I was desperately trying to find examples of a few really cool creatives that I've seen posted in various groups I'm on, and I realized that I actually can't find them because I can't quite remember what it is that they do. So they're probably a great example of the creative overshadowing the actual substance of the content, which is not what you want. In terms of tracking the success of your creative, then again, you want to be looking at, are you building brand equity over time? What's the reach like? Are people sharing it? Are they talking about it? Is it going viral? Is it hitting all the right notes? And what is the cut through? Again, is it generating interest, conversation? Does it stand out? Do people remember it? So there's some of the key things to focus on from a creative perspective. And then last but not least, let's talk about the conversion experience. So why is this important? Well, it can kill all of your good work. You can do all the other 4 steps incredibly well and then forget potentially to give them a decent landing page experience. And they could land on something that looks a bit like this page, right? Something from the 90s, blocks of walls of text, loads of terrible square form fields, etc., that no one's going to fill out. So the conversion experience will really dictate ultimately a lot around your cost per acquisition and ultimately, of course, your conversion and click-through rate. However, you also want to weed out bad fit leads. So you don't necessarily want it to be so easy or simplistic for someone to sign up that you are flooded and inundated with a ton of bad fit or low intent leads. So you've got to strike the balance, and that's where actually tweaking and working on and being very intentional around your conversion experience and making sure it's aligned with everything else in your demand gen campaign, from the targeting to the channel that people are coming from, through to the content and the creative that you've put in front of them. The landing page experience needs to match all those areas that have come before it. If not, it's jarring. So how to improve? Well, from a very tactical perspective, you can test different CTAs to see which ones drive better conversion. That's both in terms of the CTAs on the channel that you're using to advertise and on the landing page you're driving them to. As I mentioned just a minute ago, you need to have the right level of friction. So, for example, adding in another form field, asking for a phone number, not mandating it, but asking for it, may well help you. It may well, because it looks a little like more information, drop some of your conversion rate, but it might mean you get 10, 20, 30% more numbers than you would otherwise, which means your sales team can then follow up with them, which actually leads to a much higher conversion rate than if you didn't have that form field asking for the number. And you might have a slightly higher conversion rate on the form, but overall, the campaign is going to convert more poorly. So you've got to have that right level of friction. You need to offer value, trust, and credibility. This is where things like quotes and social proof is really important. Giving people a crappy offer to share their details is not going to induce them to do that. And then making sure there is a service level agreement in place with the sales or the SDR team so that they are following up in a timely manner with the leads that you are spending all that time and money on capturing. Otherwise, they can also go to waste even when you've done everything else right. If they go in and just get left, they are not necessarily going to do anything else, and it's going to be a massive waste of their time and your money. In terms of tracking success on your landing pages or where you're sending people for your conversion experience, look at things like bounce rates, the conversion rates on the page, and conversion rates down the funnel as well. That's a good indicator that if things are not converting down the funnel, there's other reasons that may be, such as your targeting's wrong or you've got the wrong message and so on, but it may also be an indication that you've got the right people coming in, but with relatively low intent, and therefore they're not converting. And you might want to up the level of friction that you have before they get into the funnel. And that is it. 25 minutes, rapid fire. Thanks very much for watching. Hopefully it's given you some sense of how to get on top of your future demand gen campaigns, make them perform, understand the inputs that you can tweak. And for anything else, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. Would love to chat if you have any demand gen challenges or anything around your general go-to-market approach. Thanks.